Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Again, my name is Jennifer Glaze, and I am the host at the weekly talk show on OTV Media Network called Becoming Your Best. I am a mental health professional. I've been in the field about, over 14 years. And I am the owner of a private practice in Ackworth, Georgia by the same name, Becoming Your Best Counseling Services. So today we are going to start a three-part series that we've entitled Holiday Heartbreak. As we've mentioned previously, the holidays are a particularly unique time period. Of course, we have the traditional things of Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, and the traditional festivities that it brings with the loved ones and the however you celebrate with the Christmas trees, if that's how you choose to celebrate, or different services. There's a lot of camaraderie, a lot of togetherness, a lot of love. However, this is also a time period that can be particularly challenging for a lot of people. We see it from one perspective with the love and the togetherness, but what happens if circumstances are such that you don't have that? You don't have the love, you don't have the togetherness. So what we want to do is provide in three parts, three different topics three different topics that I've noticed in my time in the field that people struggle with during this season. So the first topic is depression. That's what we'll be covering today. I kind of think depression gets a bad rap. So I hope that during our time together, we can go over some aspects of depression, maybe clarify some things, and maybe help people to get a better understanding on what depression is. So if I could get slide number 1, please, if we could see that on the screen. So what I first want to do is, of course, provide a definition of what depression is. Us mental health professionals have a what would you call it? A guide or a text, if you will, that we use when we're diagnosing people. So I pulled this definition from that manual, and it says that their definition is that depression is the presence of sad, empty, or irritable mood, accompanied by somatic, which is body or physical, and cognitive, which is thoughts, changes that significantly affect the individual's capacity to function. So let me read through that totally. So depression is defined as the presence of sad, empty, or irritable mood accompanied by somatic and cognitive changes that significantly affect the individual's capacity to function. So looking at that, that's a pretty complicated definition. I think most times people just think of depression as the sadness, the tearfulness. But as we see, there's much more that goes along with that. Also, not presented in this brief definition is that depression is something that's persistent. It's not just a brief period of sadness for a day or two and then you feel like your old self. That's not depression. Depression is persistent. It's not your typical just mood fluctuations. It's much more in depth than that. Depression is also known to be the major cause or the main cause of disability worldwide, and that's according to the World Health Organization. I also want to mention that depression not only affects adults, but it also affects our adolescents and our children as well. Okay, so it does not discriminate. It does not only impact our young adults or our elderly or our middle age, but we see young people, 5, 6, 7, 8, with depression symptoms. Let's go ahead to the next slide, please. So, what are some of the symptoms of depression? So this graphic will go into that, and you can see that it's broken down into 4 sections: the emotions, behavior, thoughts, and physical. And then even from those 4 portions, this graphic breaks down the symptoms of depression. What I want to go, if we look at the top, the section that talks about emotions. So the sadness, I believe, is what we're typically familiar with when we talk about depression. But let's go down to anger, and let's go down all the way to the bottom of that section: irritability. Those are very common symptoms of depression. However, if you would ask your average person, they most likely would not identify anger or irritability as a symptom of depression. Depression doesn't look the same way in every person. Just like every person is unique, the way they're going to present a mental disorder is going to be unique and individualized to how that person is and how that person reacts. So we have to not paint situations with a broad brush, so to speak. We have to look at the individual and see how it manifests or how it presents itself in that individual, and then determine if a diagnosis of depression is appropriate. So with emotions, very common feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. If we go into behavior, we talked about crying, withdrawing from others. Isolating is very common. Neglecting responsibilities. I believe the definition spoke to that. Changes in personal appearance can be very important. And then this last one, being agitated or unable to settle. So that's something that may go under the radar, but that's a common symptom of depression. So with our thoughts, self-criticism, indecisiveness, thoughts of death and suicide, and this is a symptom of with our thoughts that can be present in depression, but it doesn't have to be. And let me also mention, these lists are not all exhaustive. And also, you don't have to present everything to be diagnosed as clinically depressed. These are just kind of general symptoms, if you will, that some people will present with. Oftentimes, long-term depression can result in thoughts of death or suicide, but because you don't have that, you don't just because you don't have that doesn't mean you're not depressed. That's what I'm trying to say. And then let's look at some of the physical changes. So a lack of energy is a typical physical change. Sleeping too much or too little, eating too much or too little. Those are typical things. And then also the substance abuse. That's kind of in the field of mental health is kind of what came first, the chicken or the egg. Did the depression cause the substance abuse, or did the substance abuse cause the depression? And that we really don't have a definitive answer on that, but very often substance abuse and mental health disorders go hand in hand. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide, please. So, what causes depression? So that's a very complicated question, and it doesn't have a specific answer. You know, it varies again from individual to individual. If we look at this graphic, we've got on one side, let's look at the biological concerns that can cause depression. So brain chemistry imbalance and genetics and biology. Sometimes it is in the genes, that depressive state. We may have family members who have struggled with depression, and we may be predisposed, so to speak, to encounter depression. If our brain is suffering from an imbalance, it doesn't matter what we do or how much positive thinking or how much exercising that we're doing, we probably are going to have to address that in some different ways. But those are some of the biological causes of depression. Also, on the other side of that graphic, certain aspects of the female experience, such as having a baby and postpartum depression. Those are some elements or some parts of the depression field that are only going to impact women, but because of what our bodies go through in that child birthing experience, it may cause us to suffer some depression. Let's go on to some other things. Let's look at the bottom. Traumatic events. That's probably what's most understood or expected when we think about depression. We're going to think about the loss of a loved one. We're going to think about maybe just general senses of loss, maybe loss of a home due to a natural disaster or what have you. But any type of traumatic event is definitely going to put someone at risk for developing depression. Also, if we look at this graphic, physical health concerns and the poor diet are mentioned. Some people are born with certain chronic health conditions that they have to endure throughout their life. That can be a contributor to depression. Also, maybe people develop medical conditions due to, over time, maybe not eating quite as well as they could. However, those things can impact how the body feels, and then that can impact how the brain feels and how the mind feels and how your mood feels. And next thing you know, you're in a depressive state. Also, some situations, stressful situations, maybe environmental situations, social factors. Those are all things that, again, can contribute to feeling, to getting in a state of depression. So this is a general sense. Again, it's not all exhaustive, but these are just some of the common causes of depression. So if we can move to the next slide, please. The thing about depression, and here's where I want to kind of have a conversation with people, family, society in general. And when I say that depression has gotten a bad rap, let's look at the top. What people think causes depression: weakness, laziness, and inability to suck it up. What if I've also heard just mental, you're not strong enough. You're not strong mentally. If I was stronger, I wouldn't be going through this. If I was tougher, I wouldn't be going through this. And then often, not only does the person have that mindset, but very often their families, their support system also has that very same mindset. And when you have someone telling you, just get up, just suck it up, but you're in a position where you can't, because remember, the previous definition said that it's persistent, it impacts you physically, and it changes your capacity to function. That was the end. It says it changes your ability to function. So if you're going something that changes your ability to get up, go to work, tend to your kids, tend to your home, but you're being told, oh, just suck it up. How does that work? How does that work? Does that make you feel better or worse? Does that increase your depressive symptoms or your depressive state? But what we really need to do is we need to look at what actually causes depression. Let's look at this graphic. Things we didn't mention. Trauma is a huge contributor to depression. So often we have people who have experienced trauma and have never addressed it. They keep moving and they never take time to take care of themselves or heal themselves. We mentioned the chemical imbalance. Grief and loss is actually going to be the topic of next week's conversation. Excessive stress. Let's talk about COVID for a second. COVID is probably one of the most stressful things that we've gone through as a country in quite a while. But let's talk about work stress, home stress. Sometimes it's relentless. It never lets up. that can contribute to depression. The next one, being the carer at the expense of someone else's own well-being. So you're giving and giving and giving, taking care of others, never taking care of yourself. We talked about genetics, we talked about the biology, lifestyle, body images. Let's talk about social media. If you're constantly looking at these images of these perfect bodies and these perfect people, perfect men, perfect women, and you're not really taking into consideration all the airbrushing and the filters that are going on, but you're comparing those images to your image, then you're never going to feel like you live up. That can definitely contribute to a sense of depression. Let's see, perfectionism. That's a big one that I see in my practice. Men and women just wanting to be perfect, but we're humans. Nobody's perfect. We all have faults, but we have to be accepting of those faults. Lack of social support. Again, our support system is crucial. If we don't have support from our loved ones, from our friends, we're just out there on our own, we can really have some severe impact. And then low self-esteem, low sense of oneself. Huge contributing factor. And just as I said, depression is a very complicated illness. There's no simple solution that allows one to snap out of it. So just like I said, it's a challenging situation. But does that mean that someone has to be stuck in depression once they get to a depressive state? Are they stuck there? No, absolutely not. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So, common treatment types for depression. So you'll see there's a variety of treatments listed. As a mental health professional, psychotherapy, that's the piece that I would handle, that one-on-one talk therapy. Also, there's family or couples therapy. So that very often is an important piece. Very often people just don't have an outlet, or they don't have an outlet where they can say what they need to say and not be judged. We've talked about how talk therapy is really, I describe it as just talking, having that impartial person that we can talk to and express ourselves to and get our things out and not have to worry about hurting someone's feelings or retaliation or just having a sense of damaging an important relationship. I believe talk therapy is extremely important. Let's go down to the bottom. Sometimes medication is needed or is helpful. Particularly, let's go back to the times we talked about the biological changes, sometimes a chemical imbalance. Sometimes there's genetic issues. Sometimes there's biological issues that are contributing to the depression, and we need a medicinal intervention. Let's go to the middle, hospitalization. There are times when the mood is so low that a hospitalization or what we would call a stabilization intervention might be helpful. I give this kind of, I guess, illustration when I go out and see clients. So I tell them oftentimes, I say, so if this is where your normal mood is, right now you're showing me your mood here. Our job is to close that gap. So if this is your normal mood, you're here. That hospitalization may be able to get you in a different environment, get you stabilized on some meds, get you feeling a little bit better. So it may bring you up a little bit here. And then maybe when you discharge, you're better than you were. You're still not quite where you want to be. So then we want to, upon discharge, pair that with continued medication and some talk therapy to get you back in the range of feeling more normal or more typical for you. So a hospitalization is a brief, it's a brief time period. It's not long term. We don't do that anymore for people. We don't do institutionalization. That doesn't happen except for very rare cases. Right now, we'll do 3, 5, 7 day stabilization periods. Sometimes it's needed. Sometimes it's very beneficial. Is it required all the time? No. Again, it's individualized. And then finally, self help strategies. Very often people find meditation, self help books, um, affirmations, um, self help strategies, honestly, at this point, really could be exercise, diet, changing some things within your home. That can also be part of the solution or part of the benefit. Now, again, depression is a multifaceted challenge or situation, and very often it's going to take a multifaceted way to address it. One thing is not going to work. One hospitalization is not going to be impactful. Just seeing your therapist is not going to be impactful. Just taking your medications is not always everything that it's going to be. You need to pair it with some other things. We got to work in tandem. We've got to work some things together to help get you back to equilibrium. Remember, I gave that example. If you're here, if your normal is here and you're here, we want to gradually bring you up. And I mentioned about 3 different things to help bring that person up. Let me mention something else about medications. Very often, people take medications for 2 or 3 days. They don't like how it makes them feel, and then they stop. Let me ask you, if you were diagnosed with a heart problem and you were prescribed medication by your cardiologist and you took it 2 or 3 days and you didn't like how it feel, would you how it made you feel, would you stop taking it and never take it again? Or would you go to your cardiologist and say, "Hey doc, I don't like this. It causes this, that, or the third. Is there something else?" The same can be said about your mental health medications. If you have a psychiatrist or you have a nurse practitioner, a psychiatric nurse practitioner who's prescribing your medications, you take it, you don't like it makes you feel funny, go to them. Before you discontinue the medication, go to them. Tell them how you're feeling. Tell them what's been going on. Ask them for something else. They may give you something else. They may tell you to hold on and keep taking it. Sometimes the medications don't kick in for a good 30 days, 60 days. But sometimes you have to ride it out. And sometimes the side effects that we experience are we may have side effects, but the benefit outweighs the side effects. So my thing about it is, just like we have to work in a relationship with our professionals for our physical health concerns, we have to work in a relationship with our professionals for our mental health concerns. Don't cut the relationship with the medication provider. That's a big stigmatizing issue. Medications do work, do help, but oftentimes it takes a couple of tries to find the medication, to find the dosage, to find the combination that works for you. Don't give up. Keep going, keep trying, find out what works for you. Let's go ahead to the last slide. So in closing, I like this image because you see the young man, handsome looking young man. He's not got a nice smiling face. And but you see from the image what's going on inside, where his thoughts are. He's smiling on the outside, but he's just slumping it in the dumps from the inside. And here's the thing, we can't get caught up in just what somebody looks like on the outside. When that person's coming to work, they're doing this and they're doing that and they're smiling. They can't be depressed. Nothing could be further from the truth. What we have to do is look at what's truly going on within that person. You'll see from this image, he's numb emotionally, he's dead spiritually, he's drained mentally, but physically, he's smiling. Thank you for those images. So, in closing, I just want to say, depression is very complicated. It's a very complicated situation. And it really does take a professional to diagnose and to treat. So I want to encourage everyone to not cut out the mental health professionals. Allow them to come and give a proper diagnosis. There are multiple types of depression. I didn't even go into that. I did not go into that at all. But what I did was just provide kind of an overview about depression in general. But there's so many different types. There's different ways of treatment. Allow the mental health professionals to guide you through that process and help you through that, especially during this time. This holiday season, first of the year, can be very difficult, can be very challenging. Allow someone to help you through that transition this time of year and throughout the year so that you can have a good outlook. If you are suffering from some forms of depression, it may not even have reached a clinically appropriate level where you can reach the diagnosis. It doesn't have to. You don't have to wait until it gets there before you seek services. Seek services as early as you can and work to make improvements so you can find some increases in functionality, not have changes in your thought process, not have the physical bodily changes that depression will also provide. Because again, we talked about how your mental health and your physical health are well connected. So let's reach out now. Let's move forward. Let's focus on how to have improvement. Let me go ahead into the comments. So Robin saying awesome information and much needed, especially in our community. Yes, ma'am, Miss Robin. Yeah, our people of color and the Black community, we do have a significant level of stigmatizing thoughts or stigmatizing beliefs regarding depression. And we touched on that earlier, just snap out of it. You got to be stronger. That's not at all what depression is about. I don't know how much stronger you can be if something is a biological change. Nobody would say, if you said, oh, my foot is broken, nobody would say, be stronger. Get over it. They would never say that. So, or if that somebody experiences something traumatizing, we've had so many different traumatizing things that have occurred, even just in the last, not even 12 months, 10, 9. It's having an impact on us. The question is, to what degree and what do we need to do about it? Or do we just pretend that it didn't happen? To really lead a full, healthy life, we need to address the challenges that we have. And we also have to remember we have a younger generation watching us. And as I mentioned earlier, our young people do experience depression. They do. Let's come out of that. Oh, you don't have anything to be depressed about. I beg to differ. We've got to start looking at things differently. So, in closing, I do want to mention that, as I said before, next week's show will be on grief and loss. I will have a special guest who specializes in this area. We want to hear about her thoughts about grief, how she counsels people going through the grieving process, and she also has some services available for you. As far as reaching me, again, my name is Jennifer Glaze. I can be reached on all social medias under Becoming Your Best Counseling. I have Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And in closing, I just want to encourage everyone to live every day working to become your best. Take care. Goodbye.